Hello everyone. Now this is my Star Wars tier list. Now I'm doing this for complete fun. I'm not trying to make out that this is the right list or even that my ratings are also the order in which I'm ranking these are not so much based on objective quality as much as they are based on how much I enjoy these films and shows on a personal level. So there is quite a strong likelihood that you might very well disagree with this list, and that's fine. This is purely based on my own personal opinion and my own personal enjoyment of these films and shows as well. Now, this video will contain spoilers, so if you've never seen any Star Wars, or if I come to speak about a show, I'd recommend skipping, and then you can skipping the parts where I talk about Star Wars things that you've not seen. I can maybe add this in the description, add the different timings to the description. First, we have the Phantom Menace. Now, for a long time, people really, really hated this film. It doesn't get as much hate as it used to since the sequels have come, but there are definitely still people that do hate it. Speaking as someone who has grown up with the Phantom Menace since childhood, I do enjoy the Phantom Menace. I certainly enjoy aspects of it a lot. I think the lightsaber battle with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Darth Maul is fantastic. One of the best duels in the saga, in my opinion. Love that duel. And the John Williams' score is absolutely fantastic. Really, really epic. However, there's definitely still problems with the film. It's definitely not a perfect film at all. I think how the story was executed on screen could have been better. The dialogue and acting is definitely not that good. But it also doesn't really bother me that much. It doesn't affect my enjoyment of the film. And yeah, the Jedi do tend to speak in monotone voices through a lot of this, but at the same time, I think that is the way George Lucas was basically presenting the Jedi as being. He was presenting them as being these characters that didn't want to let their emotions overtake them, basically. That was how they were trained. Jar Jar Binks is definitely an annoying character, but I don't hate him, as I did find him very, very funny as a child. And to this day, I don't really mind him, honestly. He's just okay for me. But yeah, his scenes are definitely a bit too overdone. They have way too many scenes of Jar Jar Binks to the point where he gets a bit distracting when you're meant to be taking stuff seriously. But I also do not like the fact that I'm not a massive... As much as I do like Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn, I do kind of feel like the story would have worked better if Obi-Wan Kenobi had just been the one to train Anakin from the beginning, rather than Qui-Gon Jinn being there, because, in the original trilogy, there's never any mention of Qui-Gon Jinn at all. You kind of get the impression that Obi-Wan Kenobi himself was the one that saw how strong the Force was in an Anakin, and he was the one that decided to train him, when in reality, it was Qui-Gon Jinn. According to the Phantom Menace, it was Qui-Gon Jinn who saw the Force in Anakin, and he wanted to train Anakin, but, he died before he could. So this kind of retcons what the original trilogy was said in a few ways. Also, the fact that Obi-Wan also says in the original trilogy that Yoda was the master of him. He was his trainer, when in the prequels we find out it was Qui-Gon Jinn. It's also pretty clear that Yoda must have trained him as a youngling, when he was much, much younger, as a young child. And that is the actual explanation. So as a whole, yeah, Phantom Menace, it is still a decent film. I do enjoy it, but it's just not... It's not that good. I'm going to put it in C tier. Now, Attack of the Clones, next. This one, I do enjoy more than The Phantom Menace, honestly. This one, Now, there's a big debate among Star Wars fans on which prequel is worse, Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones. Some people think Phantom Menace is okay and Attack of the Clones is absolutely awful. Some think Phantom Menace is awful and Attack of the Clones is just okay. There is some debate as to which one is the worst prequel. For me, though, I do enjoy Attack of the Clones more than The Phantom Menace, just on a completely subjective level. I can see why people don't like Attack of the Clones. It has its problems. I think the Nostalgia Critic put it best, that he said Hayden Christensen was actually a really good pick for Anakin. I think he nails this performance, but his delivery of the lines definitely isn't the best, especially not in Attack of the Clones. I think, though, the scene when he slaughters the Tusken Raiders, and the scene when he feels so much guilt about it, and you can see the rage on his face when when he loses his mother and takes it out on the Tusken Raiders. It is done very, very well, that scene. And it actually does a good bit of foreshadowing for where Anakin's going to end up. You know that he's going to join the Sith down the line. And this is almost like a way to foresee what's coming, basically. And I think it did do a pretty good job at this. I also think Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi got to really shine in this film and Revenge of the Sith. In Attack of the Clones, you really got to see, you get to see how great as Obi-Wan, how great of a casting choice this was. The love scenes, though, between Anakin and Padme, are not a very big fan of them, but I have always known them to be this way. Like I've known about them. They've always been a big part of my childhood, so I don't really mind them that much, but I can see why people are put off by them. The dialogue can be a bit cringe sometimes in it. I'm going to put Attack of the Clones in B tier. Revenge of the Sith. Oh, no, actually, no, we'll do it in chronological order. So next it would be the Clone Wars. We'll go with the Clone Wars. Is that just the Clone Wars film there? Yeah. We'll go with the Clone Wars film next. This one is pretty naff. Honestly, I just don't much like this film. This served as a pilot for the TV series. It just wasn't that good, honestly. It was pretty rubbish. But, it does work as a pilot to the TV show. You get to see Ahsoka for the first time. It is watchable for me, but I don't really like it that much. I'm going to put this in D tier. Then we have the Clone Wars series, the TV show. Now, this I love. The first 2 seasons are good, but they just keep getting better as they go along. Now, it is, some episodes and arcs are definitely better than others are, but when it's good, it is some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen, and the finale to Season 7 was honestly quite possibly my favourite arc in all of Star Wars. I absolutely loved it. It was phenomenal. It did such a great job at bridging the gap between the prequels and Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars, along with the original trilogy too. It did such a fantastic job of tying these things together. And Dave Filoni really understands Star Wars. Like he directed most of this Clone Wars series and worked heavily with George Lucas, and he really fully understands these characters a lot. Anakin feels like kind of a different character sometimes, but I do also love how the show gradually gets to show you how he's becoming further and further into the dark side and how he gets frustrated with the Jedi Council. And I think it does a fantastic job with this. While it definitely isn't perfect all the way through, the high points are just so high that I am going to put the Clone Wars TV series in S tier. It is humongously better than the Clone Wars film is. Like, so much better. And next we have Tales of the Jedi. Yeah, the timeline for Tales of the Jedi has kind of been all over the place. It's been at different points, so we'll just rank that now. Tales of the Jedi, I think when it's good, it's really good. I think learning about Count Dooku's backstory was very, very interesting. It adds more layers to Attack of the Clones, and you see his interaction with Qui-Gon when he was a Jedi Padawan to Qui-Gon. It really helps give context to Attack of the Clones. And yeah, I think in that sense it definitely helped a lot. I'm going to put this in A tier, I think. I do actually think it's pretty good. It's very good, honestly. Then I think, would it be Revenge of the Sith next? Yeah. Yeah, Revenge of the Sith. Now, this one, I love Revenge of the Sith. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's not perfect. The issues that people bring up with Revenge of the Sith are definitely valid. Anakin, Padme dying in childbirth, yet somehow Leia's still able to remember her. It does retcon the original trilogy in that way. And that honestly has annoyed me ever since I first saw Revenge of the Sith. Like, how could she remember her when she died in childbirth? That doesn't make any sense. I know that there has been theories on the explanation of this. Like, some have said, well, maybe it was Bael's wife that Leia remembered it was her adopted mother. But I think it is officially canon that Leia's adopted mother died when Alderaan exploded. You do also highly get the impression that she's talking about Padme. Like, Luke does ask her about her real mother. And especially now with the Kenobi series, it is made, which is also canon, it's made clear that Leia does know that her adopted mother is not her real mother. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, there are some issues with Revenge of the Sith. But the aspects I love about it, I really love about it. And it's very, very entertaining to watch. It is in terms of, it is probably the Star Wars film I am most entertained by. If you know what I'm saying, it's not the best. It has its problems. It does have some of the same problems with you as the first two prequels, but I do still think getting to see Anakin's fall to the dark side and seeing the Order 66, it is just, and seeing it bridge the gap between the prequels and the original trilogy and everything set up. It honestly is just such a thrilling ride to be able to watch this. And I think with the Clone Wars series as well, it makes Revenge of the Sith an even better film because you have this added context. You get to see the fall. You get to see all these years of the Clone Wars, of the clones and so on, and it really does help a lot. Sorry, I'm not the best at explaining my opinions. I might stumble a bit. I'm sorry about that. This isn't scripted either. Also, I also really love that the Clone Wars series provides an explanation for why the clones turn on the Jedi. That's never really explained originally with Revenge of the Sith, but now that we have the Clone Wars series, it all makes sense. Like, it gives a full explanation on why. Like, I always assumed before this that the clones just followed orders and they just basically just obeyed whatever order they were given. But now that we have the Clone Wars series, the explanation that they have inhibitor chips that means that they have to obey Order 66, it makes things so much better now, honestly. But yeah, as a whole, I do love Revenge of the Sith. I'm going to put it in S tier, right there with the Clone Wars series. Okay, next we have Bad Batch. Now this I do also enjoy. I don't think it's quite as good as Clone Wars for me, but I think that it is a pretty fun show. It is a fun show, and you also get to see what some of the clones are doing during the fall of the Empire. And it also helps make clear that the stormtroopers that you see in the original trilogy were not clones. Like, for a long time, fans believed they were all clones. I also thought they were clones as well. It was just my assumption. But now it is clear that clearly they weren't clones, which does honestly make sense. Like, the voices were all different in the original trilogy for all the stormtroopers, so it does make sense that they weren't clones. Yeah, I'm going to put this in B tier. I think it's not my favourite, but I do enjoy it. And after that, would it be Obi-Wan Kenobi, I think? The Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Now, I know a lot of people really... Now, this series has been very split with fans. Some people have loved it. Others have hated it. Some have just thought it was okay. It's been all over the map in terms of what people have thought of the show. I personally loved it. It most definitely has its flaws, and it could have been better than it was. But the things that are great about the series are really great, in my opinion. Some people really don't like how Obi-Wan was handled in the first episode, where he was all depressed and down, and he slowly gets back into being his old self. A lot of people don't like this. I personally thought it made perfect sense. Like, the man had been through quite a traumatic experience after he had lost his best friend Anakin to the dark side, and when he had to watch and then he watched his best friend burn alive. Like, this must have left him with a lot of trauma. You can see that I can see how he would have ended up like this, and that he would have been reluctant to continue to use the Force. I actually love some of the things that I actually think in some ways it helped make the original trilogy better in a way. The Kenobi series did. I always felt it was a bit odd that we never got to see. I always felt like the conversation between Vader and Obi-Wan in A New Hope, it didn't really feel like this was the first time they had met since Revenge of the Sith. It just, like, when you watch this scene, the Obi-Wan seems too calm for this to be the first time he's ever faced his old apprentice in like nearly 20 years. It just doesn't feel right. And I also can't see Obi-Wan calling Anakin Darth even after he's become Vader. Whereas this series helps bridge a gap here because it explains why he starts calling him Darth. Because I'll just show you the clip, shall I?
I'm sorry, Anakin. For all of it.
I am not your failure, Obi-Wan. You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did.
Then my friend is truly dead. Goodbye, Darth.
I thought this scene was really well done, was really good. If you got to see why Obi-Wan calls him Darth, because he basically because now, with Vader saying this, now Obi-Wan has fully accepted the fact that his old friend Anakin is gone now. So he just moves on and basically sees Anakin as having passed away. And now you understand also. And you can also see when he speaks to Leia, he also speaks in the past tense and talking about her father, like he's died now. So this is basically how he sees it, and it also explains why he says to Luke that your father was betrayed and murdered by Darth Vader. Like, it all makes sense now that there's the Kenobi series explaining it. So I actually think in some ways it does help improve the original trilogy and the prequels. It also adds more context as to why Leia says, Ben Kenobi, where is he? When, like, she doesn't know the name Ben Kenobi. She only knows the name Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, it adds a bit more context to that scene, which I also really liked. I know a lot of people have complained about the fact that it's odd that Leia doesn't mention being the hologram. Like, she doesn't mention how she knew him before. But it makes sense when in the show, Obi-Wan asked her not to ever explain that she knew that they knew each other. So that's now why she didn't mention it in the hologram. I know it might also seem a bit odd that Leia didn't appear to be at all upset when Obi-Wan died, but she also wasn't that upset when her whole planet was destroyed either. So it doesn't seem that hard to believe that she wouldn't be that upset about a man that she knew for a few days 10 years ago. There's definitely some problems with the show, though, for sure. It was the scene when they have Leia hiding under his Jedi robe was so stupid. Like, that scene was ridiculous. And also the scene when those trained people working for the Empire couldn't keep up with Leia when they were trained, and like she was a little child. It makes no sense that they weren't able to capture her sooner. So, like, the fact that she outrun them was pretty dumb. It was a wasted opportunity that we only got Qui-Gon in the last scene. Like, it would have been really cool if we had much more scenes of Qui-Gon and got to see his reaction to Anakin's fall to the dark side. Like, as we basically just got a glimpse of Qui-Gon at the end, which, I mean, it was really, really cool to see Qui-Gon at all. Like, I was really thankful that they finally showed him, but I would have liked more of it. You know what I'm saying? I feel like they basically wasted the opportunity to have more of Liam Neeson. I also feel like they could have done with. There's also one line in the original trilogy, which other people mention this too, when Vader says, sorry, Obi-Wan once thought as you do. Obi-Wan also wants to believe there was good in me too. And I feel like this show could have done more of that. It could have had more scenes of Obi-Wan trying to reach out to Anakin and ask him to come back to the light side. We didn't quite get that as much as we could have done, but we did still get Obi-Wan apologizing to Vader. And I think in that moment, he was trying to reach out to the Anakin side of him and see the good in him. At that scene when he has his mask ripped in half. And I think that now adds more context to that scene in Return of the Jedi when he says, Obi-Wan once thought as you do. Whereas there is nothing like that at all in Revenge of the Sith. Like, that was something which they kind of messed up on, I think, in that film, but they didn't really have any scenes of this. So I think that in some ways, I do think that this show does perfectly set up and helps bridge the gap between the prequels and the original trilogy, despite its flaws. And for these reasons, I'm actually going to put the Kenobi series in A tier. I actually did enjoy it quite a lot. In fact, I'm going to put it above Rebels. Not Rebels, sorry. I'm going to put it above Tales of the Jedi. I'm not seeing Rebels here, actually. Where is Rebels? It would be Solo next, I think, wouldn't it? Okay, so Solo, a Star Wars story I didn't really like. If there's one word I could use to describe Solo, a Star Wars story, it's unnecessary. It just didn't feel like we really needed this film at all. It basically just didn't act like we don't need to know more about Han Solo. It's past. Then did we really need to find out how he got his name? Like, was anybody really asking, how did Han Solo become a Solo? Like, was anyone really asking that question? So yeah, like, the film was certainly watchable, but it just wasn't that good to me, and I just didn't like it that much. I'm going to put this in D tier. In Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Now, here is a real hot take of mine. I don't love A New Hope as much as other people do. A lot of people consider this one of the best Star Wars films ever made, and like just behind The Empire Strikes Back. For me, it's not quite there. I do still enjoy it, but as a child, it kind of bored me to death because it was very, very dated, and like it feels the oldest. And it just doesn't quite hold up as well as the other two original trilogy do. I do still enjoy it. I think like it's a great start to this original trilogy, but and it also feels more like a standalone film as well. Because I think originally they weren't sure if they were going to make sequels to this film, so they thought it might. And it's the only Star Wars film that really feels like a standalone film. But it is still good. It doesn't really work as a sequel to Revenge of the Sith, and that's not the film's fault at all. Like they didn't even know that they were going to make prequels at the time that they made this, so it's really not the film's fault that it doesn't work in this way. But if you try watching the films in chronological order, and you try and see this as the next episode, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like there's stuff that doesn't quite line up with Revenge of the Sith. And again, it's not the film's fault, but it is what it is. But that's another issue I have with the prequels, actually, is sometimes there are a few things they do retcon a bit. But, A New Hope, I still like. I'm going to put this in B tier. In fact, I'll put it ahead of those other two. So it's a very solid B tier, but still B. I know a lot of people are going to be really, really mad that I'm putting the Kenobi series and above A New Hope. But, like I said at the beginning, it's completely my own subjective list, and I'm not trying to make out that A New Hope is a superior film to the Kenobi series. On an objective level, maybe A New Hope is superior, but this is just my own personal preference, basically. Yeah, I forgot to put... Where is Rogue One there? See, Rogue One isn't here. That sucks. I'll probably try and add that in manually a bit later, since that doesn't seem to be here, unfortunately. I don't know why they've not included Rogue One. That's a bit odd. Anyway, next we have The Empire Strikes Back. This one definitely deserves all the praise it gets. Very much a fantastic film with one of the best twists in cinema history. I'm going to put this in S tier. Absolutely phenomenal film. Return of the Jedi is also a really, really great film. Like I really love how the confrontation between Luke and Vader and the Emperor, how the Emperor tries to turn Vader evil. Not Vader evil. He tries to turn Luke evil, just like his father before him. And getting to see Vader sacrificing himself for his son is such a beautiful ending to Star Wars. I am going to put this in S tier. So A New Hope is quite low compared to the other two original trilogy. Next we have... What do we have next? Oh yeah, Andor. I forgot to speak about Andor. I know I'm in the minority on this, but I kind of found Andor a bit boring. There's definitely aspects of it that I really liked. I did like the prison scene, even though it does kind of retcon Rogue One when Cassian says that he's never been in a cell like that before. It kind of retcons that, but that still was a very interesting scene. But for the most part, I just didn't get into this film that much. It's just from... I don't think it's a bad... Not film, sorry, series. So I get my words mixed up sometimes. I'm not a big fan of the series, but, it's not... It is good. It's just... I'm just not a very big fan of it. I'm going to put it in C tier. The Mandalorian is quite good. Season 3 hasn't been very good, though. The first 2 seasons were pretty awesome. But it's just not one of my favourites in Star Wars. So I think we'll put it in B tier as well. Now, I know a lot of people are going to think, like, how can you possibly put the Kenobi series above Mandalorian? And, on an objective level, maybe you're right. Maybe the Mandalorian's a better show. But I tend to be more interested in stuff like the Sith and the Jedi when it comes to Star Wars. That's what I'm most interested in. I'm not so much interested in Mandalorians. Like, there is Baby Yoda, Grogu, as well, who is Force sensitive. And those elements are interesting. But the series as a whole, I do like it, but it's just not quite up to me as much as some of these others are. So yeah, B tier for me. Book of Boba Fett, I didn't care for most of this. Yeah, not really a very big fan of Book of Boba Fett. In fact, honestly, I felt like they almost made Boba Fett too soft, if you know what I'm saying. Like, they just didn't really do justice to his character. And they made him less interesting. I was never a massive... I always saw Boba Fett as a bit overhyped in general, honestly, but I didn't really think that this series made him better. Like, it didn't make him more interesting. But it was really cool they got Tamora Morrison back to play him. In fact, it was actually best. Book of Boba Fett, ironically, was best when it wasn't about Boba Fett, but was about the Mandalorian. When they had the scenes of Luke training Grogu, those were awesome. was like, I could have done with more of that, even though that wasn't about Boba Fett, which is the title of the show. I'm gonna put it in D tier. Like I almost want to say C just because of the scenes of Grogu and Luke, but I don't really think it's quite enough to save, considering the fact that that wasn't really even about Boba Fett. I don't really think it's fair to both it higher as that, so I'm going to put that in D tier. Next, we have The Force Awakens. Now, this one I loved. I love The Force Awakens. Now, it is basically a copy of A New Hope. But I do think it did enough things differently for it to stand on its own. We'd never seen a Stormtrooper turn good before, and the actual plot is no longer about the Death Star plans, but it's now about the map to Luke Skywalker. So there are definitely significant differences between the two films. There's just a lot of similarities as well. I'm actually going to put this in A tier. I know a lot of people are probably going to be really, really triggered that I'm putting this ahead of the higher than the film it's basically ripping off of. But I know it sounds weird to like put this ahead of the film it's basically ripping off, but I just find this more engaging to watch. However, despite the fact that I do enjoy this film, there's still kind of a lack of things explained. It doesn't really explain how this new empire came to be, but I do still enjoy the film anyway. It's a pretty good start to this new trilogy. The Last Jedi next. This one is entertaining, but I don't like it that much. Like, it is enjoyable, but I don't like what they did with Luke's character. Like what they did with Luke's character just wasn't. I just did not like this at all, and it also feels like they're trying too hard to subvert expectations. They built up about who Rey's family were in The Force Awakens, and here it just turns out they were no one, which is retconned again in the Rise of Skywalker. So it kind of always seems that they didn't really have a set plan when making the sequel trilogy. They kind of were just making it up as they went along. I'm going to put this in C tier. And, the Canto Bite stuff was also not that good. I'm going to put this in C tier. Rise of Skywalker. This one, for me, is the worst of the Star Wars episodes. I do not like this very much. I really do not like I hated the fact that they brought Palpatine back. It completely undoes the prophecy. The point is, Luke is supposed to destroy the Sith and or Anakin rather, is supposed to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force, which he did in Return of the Jedi. But now that's completely undone. Because Palpatine came back. When Vader came to destroy the Emperor, it basically was just meaningless because, he just came back anyway. But more than that, the reveal, if they really had to bring Palpatine back, it at least would have worked better if they had at least had more clues to it in the first two films. There's literally nothing to indicate that he's alive in the first two films at all. In the first two sequels, I mean. So it really very much feels like J.J. Abrams basically just brought him back just because Rian Johnson killed Snoke off. Which is not the... I honestly think it would have probably made more sense. If you're going to bring back a villain that died anyway, bring back Snoke. He was wasted in The Last Jedi. He was killed where we didn't really get to find out anything about him. We didn't get to find out who he was. We found out more about him in Rise of Skywalker. But still, that was after he died. If you're going to bring back a villain that died anyway, actually bring back one whose potential was wasted. Reveal Snoke as Darth Plagueis, like so many fans wanted him to be Plagueis. That would have been a much cooler reveal than Palpatine being alive, than somehow Palpatine returned. Yeah, so as a whole, I don't really like this film very much. I'm going to put this in D tier. Oh yeah, there's this show as well. I've kind of I planned to put this in chronological order, but it didn't quite go to plan. This Star Wars show, what's it called again? Star Wars Resistance. It's okay. It's all right, actually. It is it's not that good, but it is watchable. From the first season or something. I'm gonna put this in C tier. I don't know. It's close to D though. It's close to D than B. Star Wars Visions. I've only seen the first season, but I did quite enjoy Star Wars Visions. I'll put that in B tier. Ahsoka, I haven't seen, is because of the reason that it's not out yet, so I'm going to put that in haven't seen. Because I can't. I've seen something that's not out. It seems like the tier list template that used was missing some Star Wars, so I'm basically going to be adding some others manually to this. It doesn't have Rogue One, a Star Wars story, so I'll be adding this to it. I actually really, really enjoyed Rogue One. I thought it was a great film that it almost makes A New Hope even better when you see Rogue One beforehand, because you get to see who the people were whose lives were taken to steal the plans for the Death Star. It really does help. I also really like how it explains how there was a weakness in the Death Star and how Luke was able to bring it up, how Luke was able to defeat it. Luke was able to blow up the Death Star. Because it did always seem a bit odd that in A New Hope, in the original film, the Death Star had a flaw. Whereas now with Rogue One, it explains that was deliberate. Like they actually, the designer of the Death Star deliberately designed a flaw. And I thought that was really cool that they actually explained that. It still doesn't really explain why in The Force Awakens there's also a flaw, though. But that's whatever. But still, I thought that was a pretty cool thing that they did there. As a whole, I did really enjoy Rogue One. I wouldn't say it's my favourite Star Wars ever. Like, the characters are pretty boring, honestly. They're not that interesting. But I do still... It's definitely a good one. I will put it in A tier. Okay, so next we have Rebels. Now, Rebels is definitely not as good as the Clone Wars series, but there's definitely a lot of really good stuff in it. But when you compare it to Clone Wars, it's definitely not as good, if you ask me. But the scene when Vader gets to meet Ahsoka again is absolutely fantastic. It's very, very well done. The Obi-Wan Kenobi series did kind of rip off Rebels in that way, but Obi-Wan Kenobi series was the first time we got to see that scene in live action. So, I don't really mind. I think I will put Rebels in B tier. It's just not quite A tier for me. And then finally, we have the Star Wars Holiday Special. I decided to include this. Even though it's not canon, I kind of want to talk about it anyway. The Holiday Special, it really is the single Star Wars thing I've seen, or I've attempted to see, that I truly despise. This one is so bad, I actually cannot even sit through it. It is atrocious. It's awful. Basically, a lot of the dialogue is just Wookiees speaking, like Wookiees, going "oh" in their Wookiee voices.
Come on, Mala, let's see a little smile. Come on. There, that's better.
And it doesn't even have subtitles for it. Like, you can't even understand what they're saying. And there's these really cheesy songs, and it's just such an awful, awful holiday special. And to this day, I have never been able to sit through it. It's the single Star Wars thing I just cannot sit through. I have to put this in F tier. This is absolutely F. So this is also a reason why I'm including this, because I feel like the completionist in me feels like I'd like at least one thing in every tier. So I'm going to be putting Holiday Special in F tier. This is the tier list. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I mean, I understand that probably I have some awful takes here. Putting A New Hope in B tier is probably... I'm probably going to get some criticism for this, honestly. But it is what it is. Thank you all for watching. Take care. Goodbye for now.